Hello, I'm Lucas Horrocks and welcome to my Britannia faction guide. Today we're going to be going through the faction of Britain, going through its units, its position on the campaign map, the buildings available and all of that. So as you can see, Britain is a barbarian faction. The game describes it as a fanatical barbarian infantry plus swift charioteers. I'd say it's a pretty accurate description. And this is the area which they start off the game, the light blue area obviously. So first of all we're going to have a look at the troops and then we'll get on to their position in the campaign map. Alright, so here is Britain, and as you can see there's not a huge amount of units available. They are probably one of the least diverse, or at least they're the least numerous in terms of the amount of units available in any faction really. There's very few units is what I'm trying to say. So first of all, Barbarian Peasants. As always, peasants are terrible, poor morale, 1 attack, 4 defense. It's not good. Use them only really as a last resort, but honestly I can't ever really envision a situation where you need to use the peasants. But the only good thing about them is there's 120 soldiers in the unit on this scale, so they're relatively numerous, but in all honesty, not effective. Next up are Warband. Now Warband are pretty decent in the early game. I say decent, they will probably be your frontline infantry early on in the game because they're relatively inexpensive, they are numerous, and they've got decent stats for the early game. 7 attack, 10 defense. Their morale is neither good or bad, but it's not brilliant. That's all I know from experience, is that the Warband, if they come up against stronger infantry like Swordsmen, they will crumble very quickly. But yeah, they'll do a decent job early on in the game. You know, they're standard barbarian troops. Next up, Druids. Now, the Druid stats look pretty decent. The 13 attack, 14 defense, excellent morale, very good stamina. There's only 32 soldiers in the unit, which is a major disadvantage. It means that they're very specialist units. And to be honest, I never ever use Druids just because there's not enough of them. They can easily get overpowered by inferior troops purely because there's only 32 of them. So I wouldn't really recommend it. I would just go for Warband over Druids personally. Next up, Woad Warriors. So Woad Warriors are pretty decent. They are a big step up from the Warband. 13 attack, but their defense is only 4. Which, this is a problem with Britain. Apart from the chosen swordsmen, they haven't really got a lot of armour. As you can see, a lot of them they are topless. So it means the defense is a little bit of an issue when it comes to Britain. But they've got a decent attack, and the good morale kind of makes up for the fact that their defense is pretty poor. Next up are Swordsmen, who are relatively similar, but they've got a better defense. So definitely better than the Woad Warriors, even though they've got a slightly less hitting power. But the good morale, any troop with a good morale is pretty decent in my book. And solid attack and defense, they will do a job, most certainly. And then the upgrade from that is the chosen swordsman. A small attack upgrade, a 3, but the defense is 17, so quite hard to take these guys down. But the excellent morale is the biggest upgrade in my opinion. These guys will fight for quite a while, and they've got a bit of armour and stuff, unlike their sort of inferior counterparts. Next up, Slingers. Slingers are relatively standard across all the factions. Not very good melee attack and defense, and not even that good missile attack. To be honest, I don't rate Slingers. I'd always go for archers, but in this case, Britain don't have archers. Instead, they have head hurlers. Head hurlers are great. They really are great. So it's pretty much what you can see in the picture. They do literally hurl the heads of their enemies towards their foe on the battlefield, and they've got a melee attack of 12 as well, meaning unlike archers, if they have to fight one-on-one at close range, they will do a job. The defense is only 2 though, so they will crumble relatively quickly, but they've got good morale as well, so it kind of counteracts that to a certain extent. Their missile attack is 17, which I don't understand how a head would cause 17 attack. You know, it would cause more attack than a rock. I don't know. I suppose a head is much larger than a rock, but whatever. The war cry improves attack, blah blah blah. But the good thing about these guys, as I said, good morale, and if the enemy sees that they're hurling the heads, then they will have a morale debuff, which benefits you as Britain over your foe. Hounds, relatively standard, but they've got a decent attack. I think these Hounds might be slightly better than the Roman ones. They look a bit better, but I might be mistaken. But they're basically there for scaring enemies, chasing down people, whatever. So next up are the British heavy chariots. So what happens is Britain have only access to chariots, apart from these guys we'll get on to in a minute. They're just mercenaries. So most factions that have chariots as generals at the beginning, they, after sort of like the Marian reforms or the equivalent to their faction, after a set of military reforms, they then use normal cavalry. But Britain keep their chariots. So first of all, these are just the normal chariots, not affiliated to the general. Like all chariots, they've got a good attack and they're good at scaring enemies and so on and so forth, but a terrible, terrible defence. I don't like chariots at all. I can't control them. I much prefer cavalry. So that's the disadvantage. If you don't like chariots, Britain is a relatively hard faction to use the cavalry well. So really, you have to rely on your swordsman, for example. So the barbarian warlord or the general, this is the basic general bodyguard. Exactly the same stats as these guys basically, but they have the general, so they have a slight bonus to hit points and better morale and so on and so forth. And then these guys are the upgraded version after the reforms, I believe. Or they might not. Either way, these are the skirmishing chariots. I don't think they are actually. The warlord doesn't change. These are the skirmishing chariots, so relatively similar. Less melee attack, but they've got a missile attack as well. So they're sort of used for skirmishing. But as I said, it's hard to control the chariots. So to use them for skirmishing manually is quite difficult in my opinion. And then last are the only cavalry that the British get available. And these are the barbarian cavalry mercenaries. Not that good in my opinion, but they've got decent stats as you can see. But the cavalry is weak in my opinion for the British faction. Okay, so now we've looked at that, we're going to look at Britain's position on the campaign map, and I will give some advice about what to do as playing as Britain.
Before my grandfather's grandfather was born, this was our land. These are good places. Our gods live here, in the trees and rivers. They watch over us. We are happy. We hunt. We love. We have families, homes, a good life. But sometimes we must fight. The Romans disturb the gods. They burn the forests. They take what is ours, wives, children, land. And the Romans talk of how they will help us and protect us. They put us to sleep with golden promises. When we wake, all we had is gone, stolen. They take our sons and turn them into little Romans. Ha! So we fight to keep what is ours. What must stay ours. There can be no peace. No peace with Romans, men of stone and iron and lies. There can be only war.
So here we are as Britain, and as you can see, most of the starting territory is actually on the modern British Isles, bar one, which we'll talk about in a second. So starting off in the position here, we have this island, known as Britain, completely secure. But there is a settlement over here, which is rebel on island. Honestly, not really worth getting. It's pretty terrible, but it's something you'll get at some point. It's very easy to take over. It's just rebel settlement. You start off with a general here in Wales, or modern day Wales. As you can see, it's him and his bodyguard and one set of Druids. Mercenaries are available, but as usual, it's just terrible barbarian mercenaries. I wouldn't bother unless you're really desperate. This settlement here has 2 warband and barbarian peasants within. A Buricum, I believe that is York nowadays, has a family member, warband, slingers, and some peasants. So you could form a decent army out of these 3 settlements. And then Londinium, not the capital. I would have thought that was the capital, but I don't think it is. Oh, it probably is the capital. Yes, it is the capital. Okay. Londinium, the capital of the Britannic faction, has the faction leader, 2 warband, and some British light chariots. 1 naval force. You need to keep this so safe, is all I'm saying. And then a settlement over here. Now, this settlement is vital. Lose this, and you're pretty much screwed. And I say this because these 2 settlements, you can almost drain of their garrison. these are never going to be attacked, or very, very rarely will they be attacked. You're pretty much safe. So move all your forces down to modern day sort of France, Belgium-y kind of area. You have a general here, Belarus, with a decent force as you can see, and some mercenaries available if you're desperate. And then a force, one unit of Barbarian Peasants in the city. This is your only settlement on the mainland, so it's vital that you use this as a springboard to attack the other factions. The other factions being Gaul, which is over here, and Germania, which is over here. Now, the difficulty with playing in this part of the world is you can easily get into a lot of fights early on. You could go to war with Germania, then the Gauls, and then of course the Julii start coming over and you really get trouble. So what I would advise is have an alliance with one of them. I would probably have an alliance with Germania, because they are relatively dangerous in the early game. So I would advance through Gaul. Now Gaul is going to be weak in the early game because the Julii will attack almost immediately from the north of Italy, and they will advance north, meaning all the Gaelic troops will move down south, exposing these settlements around here. I'll turn off the Fog of War just so you can see. Obviously I wouldn't play with the Fog of War off normally, but just so you can see. So these settlements will be isolated and alone. Rennes, Alesia, Londinium, etc. So you can sweep down with these armies and take them. That's what I'd recommend. And don't be afraid of going to war against the Julii. You need to take them on early on. This is my advice always. Take the Romans on as quick as you can, because if you don't and you let them grow and the Marian reforms happen, you'll be facing urban cohort and legionaries and auxilia, and it'll be a lot more difficult. You'd much rather be facing Hastati and Principes and Triarii than the advanced later units of the game. But it's not easy. That's why you don't want to get into fights with Spain and Germania and all these potential enemies when there could be a problem. So my general advice is take advantage of the fact that the Gauls are weak. I would have an alliance with the Germanians. Not always possible, they sometimes don't budge. But if you've got a decent diplomat, how good is this guy? He is only 2 influence, but if you get him a bit better, get him over to Germany early on. But yeah, keep this naval force safe from the Gauls, because this is your only way of transporting troops from here to here. And as Londinium hasn't got a dock, you can't recruit anymore. So until you get a dock, you can't move troops from here, from the British Isles to the mainland of Europe. So now I've discussed the campaign strategy, I'm going to look at the buildings that are available to the British campaign. So to do so, you open the construction window and the building browser. Now a lot of the units are basic, they're the same to all the factions, particularly the Barbarian factions, so I won't go through them. Ones that are relatively unique are the Taverns. They're unique to Barbarian factions. They have a bonus to happiness, as you can see. But the temples are the ones that are unique to the specific factions that they belong to. There are 3 temples available, which you can upgrade to sacred circles. So the 3 temples, we have this one here. I'm not going to try and pronounce these names because, well, that one's relatively obvious. It's Britannia and Andrasta. But this, I'm not sure. Britannia, I don't know. My pronunciation is brilliant. But anyway, the sacred circle, which is the highest level of this temple, allows you to train Druids, obviously. But the public order and public health bonus, 15%, is decent. So if you're having trouble with public order for whatever, or health, this is the shrine for you. Next up, Britannia has an increase in tradable goods. That's quite a good one if you want to get some economy going, particularly in the early game. And it also has the happiness bonus, like all the temples do. And then last, Andrasta, the sacred circle, has an experience bonus, which is great. Can train head hurlers and woad warriors with experience, which is great, and also a public order bonus to keep the public order up, so that's good as well. Other than that, it's all relatively basic. So that is pretty much it for the British faction guide. There isn't a huge amount to say other than almost evacuate the British Isles and get down and start conquering, blitzing these settlements particularly is what I would say. Looking at how defended they are, Rennes is easy to take, 1 unit of garrison. Lesia is a bit stronger, but once you've got a decent force, you should be able to take that as well. Londinium is always weak, 1 garrison. You see what I mean? All the troops are going to be down south, over here, and that means it should be relatively easy to blitz this kind of area. Lugdunum's a rebel settlement as well, so you get the idea of that. So that has been all for today. Thank you very much for watching, and I will be back with a new faction guide and the Mercenary Challenge very, very soon. Thank you very much, and goodbye.